The 90s were an important time for video games in the public eye. Years prior, video games were an unregulated market where anything goes. But after the release of games like Night Trap and Mortal Kombat, which both featured excessive violence and adult themes, changes to the distribution of video games had to be made. The 1993 to 1994 US Senate hearings on video games resulted in the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, a company that classifies video games into various age ranges depending on the content within them. Games with less offensive content would be given lighter ratings intended for younger audiences, and games with more offensive content would be given more intense ratings reserved for mature audiences. This changed the way that developers made games, as leaning towards those more mature ratings would allow for ultimate creative freedom, but at the literal cost of less sales. However, some developers weren't scared, and if anything, embraced the mature rating niche. Paradox Development and Virgin Interactive were a developer and publisher duo who didn't fear the ESRB. They were set out to make a game more graphic than Mortal Kombat. They were set out to develop Thrill Kill, a raunchy, horror-themed fighting game for the PlayStation that would blow everything out of the water. Or at least, that was the intent before it got cancelled. But why did Thrill Kill get canned? What caused the hype to come to a sudden stop and prevent the game from ever being released? In today's episode of Game Graveyard, we're taking a look at one of the most infamous cancelled games ever, Thrill Kill. Before Thrill Kill, Paradox Interactive wanted to create a sports-themed game based on Olamalitzli, better known as the Mesoamerican ball game, which was a sport played by Aztec people. Hey, to all other commentary video essay YouTubers, see how easy it was for me to just find the pronunciation of a word instead of being like, I'm gonna butcher this? It's that simple, you can just Google it. Stop undermining non-English cultures and people with that overused joke. It's so stupid. Virgin Interactive, Paradox's publisher, kept pushing for the game to be more and more mature to the point where Paradox scrapped the sports game entirely and went back to the drawing board. What they came back with was a 4-player fighting game where violence and adult themes were at the forefront. Everything else took a back seat to the shock value of its main premise, characters, and combat. Thrill Kill's main premise follows multiple characters who have been sent to hell after varying deaths, most being suicides. Some of the characters committed sinful acts in their time on Earth, others are just there, I guess. The gameplay revolves around you dealing attacks to your opponents to fill up your Thrill Kill meter, and then once it's full, you can use a Thrill Kill attack to eliminate an opponent from the match. Normal attacks and Thrill Kill attacks are all over the top in a violent and or sexual nature, meant to push the mature rating as far as it would go. Everything from the characters, the sound design, the menus, the premise, the combat, it was all being pushed as far as the ratings would let them. Or at least that's what the devs thought.
Need a new form of entertainment in your life? Join the thousands of others who have hit the subscribe button. Side effects of subscribing may include joy, laughter, and newfound knowledge about video games. Talk to your doctor about if subscribing is right for you.
Don't miss new episodes of So What Happened To, Saturday mornings on RatedEm.
With all of this over-the-top violence and sexual content, Paradox were sure that they had a hit on their hands. Mature games before Thrill Kill didn't have this much graphic content oozing out of the seams. A beta release of the game was sent to multiple review outlets, and one was also sent to the ESRB. The reviewers said that the game was fun, but definitely unfinished. Comments were also made regarding its offbeat 4-player free-for-all design, which differentiated from the more traditional one-on-one 2D fighting games. While some praised it, others loathed it. The most harmful criticism was the rating that the game received. The ESRB deemed the content too graphic for the mature rating, and gave Thrill Kill an adults-only rating. If you're unaware of the adults-only rating, it's a rating given to very few games, and games that do get the AO rating usually have their content altered before release to fit the mature rating. The adults-only rating is so harmful to a game because it prevents it from being sold on store shelves. In today's age, it's not that big of a deal considering that platforms like Steam or GOG allow this content for preservation's sake, but in the pre-digital purchase era, store shelves were your only option for turning a profit. Virgin Interactive requested that the game be toned down to be sellable, even though early on they were just as passionate as Paradox was about making the content as graphic as possible. Paradox's response to toning the game down was changing the in-game model of the character Imp to more closely resemble Harvard Bonin, the producer assigned to the project. A back and forth ensued where the developers wanted to retain the game's shock value as much as possible, but higher-ups wanted it toned down in order for the game to even be sellable. However, all of this would come to a halt in August of 1998, where Electronic Arts would acquire Virgin Interactive, and thus they acquired control over Thrillkill. EA directly opposed the game in its entirety, and as soon as they could, they shut down any and all chances of having the game released, even with the adults-only rating. Keep in mind, Thrillkill at this time just needed bug fixes before it was fully finished. Apparently, Electronic Arts didn't even tell Paradox that they were canceling the game, and the developers only found out through external news outlets. A few Paradox employees spoke out about the abrupt cancellation and hinted at the idea that there was more at play than you would think. Supposedly, EA higher-ups had connections with the exact senators who campaigned the 1993 to 1994 congressional hearings, and they had a hand in putting the final nail in the coffin for Thrillkill. While Thrillkill never officially got a release in stores or by any other conventional means, the beta that was given out to review outlets later leaked online and bootleg discs were made. So the game hasn't entirely been lost to time. Furthermore, the game was reskinned into a Wu-Tang Clan themed fighting game. Interesting. It's called Wu-Tang Shaolin Style if you want to do some extended reading on the topic. Paradox also reused and tweaked the engine for other projects such as the X-Men Mutant Academy games that they would release a few years later. Would the world be different if Thrillkill was released? I mean, maybe. I don't think it would have a Mortal Kombat style impact on pop culture or anything. I don't know how to word this without sounding like some desensitized freak, but a lot of Thrillkill's quote-unquote horror is just meaningless shock value that hadn't been explored in popular media before that point. In today's landscape, we've seen worse. I think a lot of horror that has stood the test of time is horror that is meant to be a metaphor for something else, something like Alien, which is a metaphor for sexual violence. When it's just gory guts and big bazongas and nothing else of substance, it's purely a visual distraction that leaves nothing to the imagination. I love Mortal Kombat with every fiber of my being, but I will apply that same critique to that series. Early Mortal Kombat games are nothing more than their shock value, and as the series goes on, the violence teeters more on just cartoonish absurdity, while the gameplay leans more into being a competent competitive fighting game. I think Thrillkill would have seen some popularity had it been fully released, but I don't think it would have been the next Mortal Kombat or GTA.